today's sessions, we are going to learn about one more background task, that is services. Okay. So what are these services? Okay, services where it can component where it performs long running operations. Okay, where it is long running operations means usually it will be running in the background. Okay, where these services does not provide any user interface. Okay, it doesn't provide any UI. Okay, that is user interface. Okay, the where here the services can be started like services can be, you can start or you can bound the service, or you can start the service, or you can do both the things. Okay, so first service is started service. Okay, so where the started service is a component where it is going to start by calling a start service. Okay, services is going to be called by the start service method. See, for example, before going on to the in depth about the service, let's take a general example. Like, for example, you have one, for example, you have your laptop where you that it gets into some trouble. So you call to the service center. You will call to get a repair. So where the service center will take your laptop and do the service. Okay, it takes for about 2 to 3 days. So will you stop doing all the other things? No, right? So service is going on, but still you guys will do whatever the necessary things you need to be do. For example, if you are a worker in a company where you will do other tasks and all. So still after you get the laptop after the service, you will start working. So likewise, it's general example where you can understand the things. Okay, so here the service can be started, or it can be bound, or it can do both. So here the first service is started services. Okay, the services, okay, that an application component, it's an application component where it starts by calling a start service method, where it is going to be runs indefinitely. Okay, this service is going to be run indefinitely until it stops itself. Okay, it is going to be run until it stops by itself. So you started services for tasks. See, when to you what all when you are going to use these started services. Okay, when your task that it is running in the background, where it is going to be perform long running operation. When you are performing a long running operations, we are going to use a started services, where this task that perform work for remote processes. Okay, so we will study in the later, okay, about the in detail about the started services. Well, next, what is this bound service? So bound service is an application component where it binds itself. Okay, where it is going to be bind to itself. How it is going to be bind itself? By calling a method bind service. Okay, by calling a method bind service, it is going to components is going to be bind to itself. So where we need to use this bound services? Okay, the component where the so the task that another application component interface to perform inter-process communication. Okay, say for example, where bound services may handle the network transactions, or it may perform file input output, or if you want to play a music, okay, or you interact with any content provider. Okay. So where a services is going to be run in main thread. Services is going to be run in main thread for its hosting process, where these services won't create its own thread. These services does not create its own thread. Okay, and it does not run separate process. The services is not going to be run a separate process. When it is going to be run a separate process, unless you specify it should do. So if you specify that it should run a separate process, then it is going to be run in a separate process. Otherwise, the services won't run in a separate process, and also it doesn't create a own thread. And if your services is going to be any CPU intensive work, okay, or any blocking operations, where if you want to any blocking operations, for example, your MP3 player, or if you are performing any operations on the networking, okay, this blocking operations create a new thread within a service so that it can do that particular work. So if you are using a separate thread, okay, if you are using a separate thread, you can reduce the risk. What risk? ANR. Okay, you can reduce the application not responding errors. Okay, if you, for the services, if you are creating your own thread, okay, if you're performing a separate thread where in the separate thread the services is going to be run, by this you can reduce the risk of application not responding errors. Okay, where the applications of the main thread, whatever the main thread applications will be there, that can remain dedicated to the user interaction. So it means whatever the main thread is there, so that will be dedicated to the user interface purpose or user interaction purpose, whatever the activity you are going to be created. Where for the services, if you are using a separate thread, so it reduces the risk where that application will not be responding like that, so errors will be there, that can be reduced. How you are going to implement any kind of services in your application? Okay, so first thing, you need to declare the service in the manifest. Okay, first step, you need to be declare the service in the manifest file. Second step, you need to create implementation code. Okay, you need to create implementation code, as I said, whether you want to perform a started services or whether you want to perform bound services. Started services or bound services, you need to create an implementation code. So third step is to you should manage the service life cycle. So as in the previous session explained about activity life cycle, likewise there is a life cycle for the service also, where you should manage the service life cycle. These are three steps you need to remember. So first step is to declare, to create an service in the manifest file. So how we are going to create a services in the manifest file? Okay, so you can declare all the services in your application manifest file. Okay, you can declare all the services within the manifest Android manifest file. Okay. So to declare a service, you need to add an element as a child of an element. Okay, you need to add an element as a child of the element. So where you are going to declare, you need to add a service element. Okay, in the manifest file, you should add an service element, where within the service element as a child of a application. Okay, see, for example, as in this code describes, this service element is child for the application element. Okay, this application element is present within the manifest element. So remember, whatever the service you are going to be declared, that service element should be declared within the application element. This is an example how you are going to declare a service. So if you want to block the access of the service from the other applications, see, for one service you have declared for one application, where that service should not be accessed to the other applications in your device. So to avoid that, to block that access the service from the other applications, okay, so you should declare the service as a private. You should declare the service as a private, where in a manifest file you need to set the exported attribute to be false, as you see in this example. Okay, to block the access from the other application, whatever the services you are using, you should set the attribute exported to the false, so that it is going to block the access of a service from the other applications. So let's see one by one. What is the started service? So how this service is going to be started? Okay, how this started services is going to be start. See, an activity calls, see, an application component such as activity, okay, where this particular activity is going to be called the start service method. Okay, if you want to start a started service, then we should use the method start service method, where this method is going to be called by the particular activity wherever you have been used, and we need to pass an intent for that particular service. Okay, we need to pass the intent for the start service method. So what does this intent specifies? Okay, the intent specifies the service. Okay, this particular intent is going to be specify the service, and it also includes any data for the service to use. Okay, and also it includes any data for the service to use it. Second step, the system calls service onCreate method. Okay, this onCreate method is an callback method of activity. Okay, the system is going to call the service onCreate method and any appropriate callbacks on the main thread. Okay, this is going to be called on the main thread, where it's left up to the service. Okay, what kind of service, okay, we are using. So it's up to the service that to implement these callback methods. Okay, with how you should implement these callback methods with an appropriate behavior, you should use this particular callback methods. Where you can create a secondary thread in which you want to work particular work. You can create a secondary thread where it is going to be work on that. So third step is the system calls service on start command method. Okay, the system is going to be called a service that is on start command method, where it is going to be passed in the intent. Okay, in the intent you are going to be passed as I explained in the step 1. So the client in the context, okay, here the client in the context means the application component that is going to be called the particular service. See, this started services, once you start, okay, once the started, the service can run in background indefinitely, okay, where this long running operations where it can be performed in the background indefinitely. So even if the component that has been destroyed, okay, so usually started services perform a single operation and does not return a results for the caller. Say for example, to understand, say for example, you are going to be download some file from the internet, or you are uploading some file to the internet. Okay, it's a service where it is going to be performed. What operation? When this operation is done, okay, over the network, if you want to download a data, or if you want to download a file, or if you want to upload a file, okay, the service should stop by itself. How it is going to be stopped by itself? Okay, by calling a method stop self. Okay, by calling a method stop self, or you can stop it by calling stop service. Okay, you can call it by stop by calling stop service method. Here, whatever the service you have been started in the started services, that service can be destroyed by using a user method or a developer or a Android OS. Okay. For example, you have been downloading a file over the network. Okay, so that notification will be shown. Okay, where you are downloading, the progress will be shown in the notification. See, until unless the notification the downloading is complete, you cannot remove that particular notification. Okay, so when you can remove that, if you cancel that on your own, that particular downloading file, then only it will be go, okay, in the notification. Otherwise, until unless it's complete, then only it stops by itself. Okay, that is performing the device, Android device. How? By using a method stop self method, or you can stop it by stop service method by the user. Next is, what is this? See, for example, suppose an activity needs to save data to an online database. Okay, if particular activity is going to be performed where that activity wants to save the data on the online database. Okay, how the activity starts service by passing an intent. Okay, that intent is going to say that where you should save the data in the online database. Okay, to start a service. Okay, how it is going to pass an intent in the which method? As I said in the first step, the start service method. Okay. So once you start the service receives an intent in on start command method. Okay, the service is the particular service is going to receive the intent in the on start method. So where it connects to the internet, and performs the database transactions. So when the transaction is completed, okay, whatever the transaction has been done, if it is done or it is completed, the service is going to use stop self method so that it stops by itself, and the particular operation is destroyed. So if you want to run this particular service, you can run in a worker thread instead of a main thread. So next is intent service. So as I said, intent will be used. Okay, so there is a service intent service also, where see whatever see, for example, most of the in the intent service, most started service don't need to handle multiple requests simultaneously. Okay, what the started service, one of the service is started service. This started service don't need to handle multiple requests simultaneously. So if they did it, it could be dangerous for threading purpose. Okay, multi-threading will be dangerous. So for this reason, it's probably to test if you implement your service using an intent service class. Okay, so to accept the multiple requests simultaneously by the static service, so we can implement the service, whatever the service we are using. So that service can be implemented by using a class intent service. Okay, intent service, you can implement this. See how you're going to implement. So intent service is useful subclass of a service. Okay, so service is a class where intent service is a subclass of a service. So first thing is intent service automatically provides a worker thread to handle your event. Okay, this particular intent service will provide the worker thread, so that by using this worker thread, it is going to handle the intent. The second thing, intent services handle some of the byproduct code that regular services need. So whatever the like, for example, if you want to start a service or if you want to stop a service, likewise. So third thing is intent service can create a work queue that passes one intent at a time to your on handle intent implementation. Okay, one intent to your method on handle implement method. So this particular method is going to handle the intent which is going to be passed through the intent service. Okay, so first you need to create an work queue in the intent service. For that work queue, you need to pass an intent. How? Only one intent at a time. So these intents will be handled by the method on handle intent method. You should implement so that you can handle the intents which are going to be passed in the working queue. So to implement this intent service, okay, to implement this intent service, you need to provide a small constructor for the service. You need to provide a small constructor for the service. First step. Second step, you need to create an implementation on handle intent. Okay, to create an intent on handle intent to do the work that client provides. Whatever the work client has been providing, that can be handled through the on handle intent method. So that's why you need to implement. You need to create an implementation for this particular method. So in this example, the class is going to extend an intent service. Okay, so for this particular class, the first step, how you are going to create the intent service? By a constructor. See, the constructor has been defined. Okay, constructor is required. So within the constructor, you should call a super intent service where you can pass the string constructor with the name of the worker thread. So as for that is the first step. Second step, you need to create an on handle intent method where you are going to pass the intent on this particular method to handle that particular intent on the worker thread. So here you are going to override the on handle intent method. So this intent on handle intent method will be there in the intent service class. Okay, you should override that method to handle the intents on the services where the so this is how you are going to handle your intents. So next is bound service. So as I said, bound services is where it is going to bind to itself by calling bind service method. Okay, a service is bound when an application component binds to itself. Okay, binds to by calling bind service. So by using this method, the bound it's going to be bind the components. Okay, so bound service runs only as long as the application component is bound to it. Okay, as long as application component is bound to it. So for example, there are 10 clients where you are going to execute some operation. For example, so there are 10 clients, you are performing some operation. So one client completed its operation. Okay, so till the 9 clients are there. Okay, that is going, still they are in the bind to that particular service. So until unless you complete all the clients, okay, then only it is going to be unbound. Until unless, okay, all the clients should get unbind. Until then, this particular bound services will be running. See, here it is. So multiple components can bind to the service at once, but when all of them unbind, then only the service is going to be destroyed. Otherwise, it is not going to be destroyed. So a bound service generally does not allow components to start by calling start service. Okay. So this bound service is not going to be start by using a method start service method. It is going to be start by using a bind service method. So how you are going to implement a bound service? To implement a bound service, you need to define an interface, okay, where it specifies how a client can be communicate with the service. So first you need to know how the client should be communicate with the service. So for that communication purpose, you need to define an interface. So this interface, whatever the interface has been defined, so that interface which your service returns from on-bound callback method. Okay, so we will learn this all the callback methods by in the next slide. So in the coming slides, okay, about there are service lifecycle diagram. So whatever the interface has been defined, so which whatever the services you will be using, that services should return from on-bind callback method. So where to use this on-bind callback method, it must be implementation of a iBinder class. It must be implementation of an iBinder interface. So to retrieve iBinder interface, okay, to retrieve the whatever the iBinder interface will be implementing, a client application components calls bind service. Okay, so after retrieving the iBinder interface, whatever the client application component will be there, so that is going to be called a bind service to bind the service. Okay. To bind the service, see once client receives the iBinder, okay, so once the client receives an iBinder, so the client is going to be interact with the services. Okay, so once the all the components has been bind to the client receives a iBinder interface. The client is after binding it, the client is going to be interact with the service. How it is going to interact with the service? Through this particular interface. Through this interface, it is going to be interact with the service. Okay. To bind, to bind a service, to bind to a service that is declared in the manifest. Okay, whatever the service you have been declared in the manifest, to bind for that, and you need to implement by an app component. Okay, you need to implement an app component. So with an explicit intent, that is you need to use a bind service method. And you should not use implicit intent. Okay, you should not use implicit intent if you want to bind a service. You should remember that whenever you are binding a service, we should not use implement service. So implement implicit intent. Okay, whenever you are going to bind a service, we should not implement implicit intent. Okay, you should use explicit intent. So let's see next, see with the service life cycles. Okay, next see with the service life cycle. So whatever the life cycle of a service is simpler than the activity life cycle. Okay, the life cycle of a service life cycle is simpler than the activity life cycle, and it is important that you should have an proper knowledge when you are creating a service or when you are destroying a service. Okay, so because service will not have any UI, service is not having any UI. Okay, services is going to be continue to run in the background. Okay, services is going to be continue to run in the background. So a service as a lifecycle callback method. Okay, a service as also has a lifecycle callback method where you can implement it. Okay, you can implement to monitor the changes in the service state. So okay, if you want to have changes in the service states, you should implement the service lifecycle callback methods where it can perform the work at the appropriate time. Okay, so let's see the skeleton of the lifecycle of a service. Okay, so when you are using a lifecycle call, a service lifecycle callback methods, the particular class should extend the service class. Okay, okay. Here, these are all the callback methods you are using. See, OnCreate, the service is going to be create whatever the code. If you want to create a service, that should be written in an OnCreate method. To start a service, you should be using the onStart command. So if you to client is binding to the service by using an onBind method that is written within the interface, that is onBind. So next, you have already written unbind, so rebind and destroy. So let's see with a diagram, right? So life cycle of started services versus bound services. So remember, when you are creating a service by using a started services, it will be using an activity lifecycle. So within the onCreate, after creating a particular service, it is going to be started by using a method onStart command. Okay, after that onStart command is going to be start the service, and service is going to be run. So services will be going to be run. So here, after service completes its work, then the service is going to be stopped by, it can be stopped by user or a developer or the Android itself. Okay, once it is going to be complete and the service is destroyed, it will be destroyed by using an on destroy method. Okay, then the service will going to be shut down. This is about started service, that is unbound. You can say unbound service or a started service. In the bound service, what happens? Okay, in the bound service, so when you are calling with a bind service, so first you need to create it by using an onCreate callback method. So if then you should bind all the client application components by using a method onBind method. So after doing that, clients are bound to particular service. So a client unbinds by calling unbind services. So if the particular task is completed, it is going to unbind with the server. Okay, how? By calling a method unbind services. So on unbind method, and then the particular service is going to be destroyed. Next is foreground services. See, most of the services will be running in the background. Okay, so some of the services will be running in the foreground. So what is this foreground service? So foreground service is a service that user is aware of. So it's not a candidate for a system to kill when the low on memory. Okay. See, for example, you have your music player. Okay, so what happens? So you open your music application and you will play a song. So the service is going to be start by the user. So the particular song plays. So while music player is playing the particular music, so you will close that application and you, for example, you are browsing something on the browser. So still that particular service is running in the background. So, but when you open it, it will be in the foreground. So to request that service, sir, and one more thing you need to know, this example is when you play a music, and if you close that particular music application and you start browsing, or if you are using any application, the music is playing still in the background, right? But in the notification, the music player will be showing. Okay, where you cannot clear that music player until unless you stop that music play, and then only you can clear that notification. Okay, if the music is playing, you cannot clear that particular notification. Okay, so in the notification status, the bar might indicate current song, whatever the current song is playing. So if you click on that, it will allow you to launch an application, that particular music activity. To request that a service runs in the foreground, you should call start foreground method. So what we have learned in the previous session about the intents is, when you want to launch an activity, you should use start service. Okay, start service method. Okay, when you are using an intent, where here when you want to request a service to run in the foreground, you should call start foreground method, where this particular method is going to take two parameters. Okay, this start foreground method will take a two parameters. So an integer where it is going to be uniquely identifies the notification, where notification for the status bar. So this notification will shows that is ongoing, that cannot be dismissed. As I said with an example, if you are running with the music player, in the notification bar, that music player will be displayed. So still the music is playing. So it cannot be dismissed until you stop the music. Okay, until this particular service is stopped or removed, then only you can remove that particular from the foreground. So here two methods, as I said, an integer that uniquely identifies the notification and a notification for the status bar. Two parameters it is going to be taken. So this is about the services. So here in the service provides, runs background tasks without the UI, started services is there, intent services is there, and a bind service is there. Okay, started services, long running service, it can be destroyed by the user, developer, and Android OS. So one of the, it's an Android component. So life cycle of started services, first on create, then on start command, then on destroy. These are all the three callback methods we'll be using when you are using a started services. So in this particular started service, on start command is a static state, where on create and on destroy is a dynamic state. So whenever you are having, each and every request will be accepted by on start command. Okay, and on create will be created only once. So intent service is a subclass of a service. So it's not a long running service. Okay, you should remember it's not a long running service. So it's a short running service. It's a intent. This particular intent service is a short running, and it destroys itself. And also intent service is going to handle a heavy task. So what is the life cycle of intent service? First is on create method, next is on start command, then on handle intent method, then on destroy. So here the queue and the request will be played in the register, where it is going to be handled with the on handle intent method. So if the queue is empty, if there is any no service on the queue, then particular service will be destroyed automatically. So whatever the request will be there, each and every request will be executed under a single thread, one after the another. So next is bound service. So until we call unbind service, it will be in the bind service. It means that it is still running until unless we call a unbind service. So OS destroys the bind service. So here OS will going to be destroy the bind service until there is no connectivity for the long time. So what are the characteristics of service? If you say with the characteristics of a service means it is going to be started with an intent. Okay, and you can stay running. So once the service is started with an intent, you can stay that running when you switch the application. Okay, so here you should manage that the life cycle, how we need to use it. So this is these things about the service.